Good evening, Madam President Zonshan Simin M. Akhtar, our two panelists, businessman and philanthropist Akhtar Mateen Chaudhary, and Professor Imran Rahman from ULAB. Zonta Club has traveled 100 years fighting for women's rights, gender equality, stop child marriage. As we embark on a new century, Zonta International has made history by having the first in Zonta world a male governor, Zonshan Eric Elavia of District 25. This itself speaks volumes that we have come a long way, but there is still so much to be achieved. Today, we have amongst us two strong men who believe in women empowerment with us. Thank you both so much for coming and making the effort, and also for wearing the color orange, which is the color of Zonta's 16-day activism. A little bit about myself. I'm Zonshan Tutli Rahman. I've been with Zonta International for more than 20 years. I'm an entrepreneur and I believe in the empowerment of women. I'm a pioneer of 7 things in Bangladesh. I will avoid the details today to save time. I'm founder of Wings, a support group for women, and also founder of Bangladesh Heritage Club Foundation to promote, revive, and restore our rich, classed, glorious heritage. I generally train mostly women artisans to become self-sufficient and to make economically solvent. At present, I'm the president of WE, Women Entrepreneurs Association. I've been twice president of Zonta Club of Dhaka 1, and later was instrumental in forming another club for Zonta, which is now Zonta Club of Greater Dhaka. I was the immediate past centennial president of Zonta Club of Greater Dhaka, 218 to 220, and at present I'm in the board in charge of advocacy on violence against women and creating awareness among the girl child. Our topic of today, as you all know, is to say no to violence against women. We have amongst us the esteemed president, Dr. Simin M. Akhtar, who will introduce herself and give an insight to Zonta and his 16 days of activism. President Dr. Simin M. Akhtar.
Thank you so much, Madam Tutli Rahman. A very good evening and Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Simin Akhtar, President of Zonta Club of Greater Dhaka. A warm welcome to everybody to today's webinar on Zonta International's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, specifically against women and girls. A brief introduction about myself is that I graduated from Dhaka Medical College, then did my higher education abroad, did my master's from King's College London with an MPH from Mahidol. Another degree I added was a degree in tropical medicine and also health sciences management in hospital services. During my course of medical practice, I had the opportunity to work globally, and my last posting or work was in Bangkok General Hospital as a director, after which I followed in Apollo Dhaka, now Evercare, for 7+ years as general manager for quality assurance. And subsequently, at the moment, I'm senior medical director at Prava Health for the last close to 4 years. Let me tell you a little bit about Zonta. Most probably you do know about it. Zonta basically was founded in 1919 in Chicago, Illinois, and it was started by a group of businesswomen who thought that they
articles. We cannot hear Dr. Simin. Can something be done? We cannot hear Dr. Simin. Can everybody hear her? Bobby and Imran, can you hear Dr. Simin? No. You're muted for some reason, Dr. Simin. Yeah, that's better. We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Should I go to the two panelists? Okay. So I will now welcome our two panelists who is with us today, Mr. Akhtar Mateen Chaudhary and Professor Imran Rahman. I will take the privilege of introducing them to you. Firstly, a very short introduction of Mr. Akhtar Mateen Chaudhary. Mr. Mateen qualified from UK, came to Bangladesh in 1987 and joined BOC Bangladesh Limited, where he later served as General Manager Finance and finally as a Board of Director. He was later Chairman and MD of Novista Pharma Limited, Organon, Bangladesh, till he retired in 2018. At present, he is Principal Consultant of Black Swan Consultancy, Chairperson of Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center, Member Board of Advisors, Bragg Business School, Independent Director, United Commercial Bank Limited, Nominated Director, Ispahani Tea Limited, Council Member, Institute of Chartered Secretaries of Bangladesh, and so on. And now introducing you to our final panelist, Professor Imran Rahman. I think everybody knows him very well because he's also a very good singer. Firstly, I would like to thank you for making ULAB our co-partner. Their student officer, Dilara Khan, has kindly informed all other universities to be part of the show. And later they will all be present in the question and answer sessions if we have time to do that. If not, then we'll just listen to the questions and we'll probably answer you later on. A short introduction about Professor Imran Rahman. Professor Imran Rahman is Special Advisor to the Board of Trustee and Dean School of Business of the University of Liberal Arts Bangladesh, ULAB. A previous ULAB Vice Chancellor, he remains a key policymaker at ULAB and oversees two research centers, international affairs, engagement with industry, and IT strategy. Prior to joining ULAB, he was in the finance faculty at IBA, Dhaka University, for 22 years. In mid-1990, he co-founded and managed a merchant bank for 6 years. He studied at the Manchester Business School, IBA, and LSE, London School of Economics. Imran is a superb vocalist and a guitarist with the Renaissance Band. Now we start the question answer sessions, and I would like Dr. Simin to come back and ask the first question if that's possible. If not, then I will just go on. Is that okay? Can Dr. Simin hear me? So without wasting any more time, let's begin our program. I will start with Mr. Akhtar Mateen Chaudhary. Akhtar Mateen Chaudhary, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so let me start with the question now. And because Simin is probably having some trouble with her microphone. So the first question to you is, violence against women a recent phenomena, or has this historically been the case? Can I ask you this question and can you answer this for me?
Yes, thank you very much, Tutli. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I can. Excellent. At the very beginning, I'd like to thank you and Zonta for this rare privilege and honor for asking me to be one of the panelists on this show and on this very important topic. I'm grateful and, in fact, humbled because I have no special skills, knowledge, or experience, except that I have lived a long life so far, and I have witnessed and experienced a lot of changes in society and changes in the world, and changes in attitude, changes in behavior. And so, in fact, I'm a witness to history, in at least in a short span. So I'd like to start by answering your question, and that is, from everything I know and everything I've read, and I have an interest in anthropology. So I do read anthropology and history. I'm interested in that. So to answer to your question actually is that no, it's not a recent phenomenon, but perhaps it is more visible today because we pay more attention to it, because there is media, because there are events which are recorded. Things are not lost, and the issue itself is really not a new issue. Today, a single case hits the headlines, which is how it should be. But historically, there have been hundreds, dozens, thousands of women who've been subject to the violence of all sorts, but they've not actually made the mark. To quote Stalin, that a single death is a tragedy, but when 10,000 people die, it's a statistic. It's a statistic. So the uh, violence against women in history has been so massive that it's been lost as a statistic. You see, early historical records show that women were routinely subjected to rape and enslavement and murder. And these were manifestations. In fact, they were the hallmarks of military victory, in which men historically played the greater role due to their natural physical strength. And one of the booties of war was the opportunity to rape the women of your enemy. That was a way of subjugating not just your enemy, not just the women, but the entire population was subdued, because this was something which was terrible. It happened to people's wives, it happened to their mothers, to their sisters, and so it was, and to their daughters. So uh, it really was psychologically um, an extremely powerful way to subdue and conquer the enemy. Now, since military might was all that counted in early history, weak people, and therefore women who were physically weak, were treated as inferior, and therefore there was no protection from violence or assault. And if you look at history, history is replete with events of mass rape, enslavement, massacres of women. See, women historically were considered of very little value, if at all. They were not much more than stray animals. It sounds terrible, but you just read history and you see. By extension, the conquest and subjugation, uh, this view was reflected in public and private life. In fact, it was a curse to be born a woman unless you're born of high birth. So you see, in most societies, raping a woman was not even considered a crime. Murdering a woman would often merit no more than perhaps a metaphorical slap on the wrist. So it was a very light punishment, if at all. And most murders of women could be compensated by a small amount of cash to the family. So women, in the eyes of in history, in historically, perhaps ancient history, had been relegated to such a level that violence against them didn't count. So you see, in the same way, being held to account for assaulting a woman was laughable. Nobody was, nobody, I mean, if women were raped, it was quite often uh, considered to be high-spirited revelry of men. It was okay, you know, and quite often, as also now, women were often blamed for being raped because they were accused of having in some way led men astray or tempted them. So being held to account for assaulting a woman actually was laughable historically. But unfortunately, history is repeating itself even today. Perhaps not exactly in the same way, but we can see some reflections of history. So, yes, to answer your question, it's historically happened, but today it's much more noticeable because we pay attention to it and it's no longer acceptable. and we have means of knowing about it, and means of protesting, means of doing something about it, society is much more open to listening to any complaints or any issues relating to women's violence. It's no longer something that's just laughed away, either in a court or in society. Does that answer the question totally?
Thank you so much. You made it very explicit. You explained it very well. Simin, I can't hear you still. Are you okay, Simin? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I'm
Okay.
good. Thank
Fantastic.
you so
You
much.
want to ask a question now?
So, okay. Yes, please. I was just thinking, Mr. Akhtar, is there a cultural context to violence against women? What is your
Oh,
thought on
very much
that?
so. Very much so. You see, male dominance over women um, was the result of women being treated as or considered to be no more than mere possessions. Um, and this emerged again from militaristic adventures that led to early statehood. The states were formed by warlords who gathered people together and who conquered territory and formed the crude state. And in that state, which was often the result of a military adventure, the military mentality got into the state and therefore into the way the state was run. So within the state, these tenets that I just mentioned about the women's views of women and the status of women, this actually took hold in the state itself. Unfortunately, if you look at scripture and theology, uh, they also supported some of these presumptions. And quite often, the early states and countries, in fact, even until recently, and some countries even now, actually revert to scripture or to theology to justify repression on women. I mean, let's take, for example, Eve was the evil woman who led Adam astray. Adam was a pure man. God created Adam pure, but Adam was tempted and was led astray by a woman. So that's the first thing that is put into people's minds, that women are evil. You have to be careful about them; they lead you astray. And then secondly, if you take allegorical reports of or allegorical, well, stories really, you'll notice that adulterers are always women. It's not men. This is the adulterers women. The adulterer that Jesus saved from being stoned to death was a woman, not a man. So these things have a very strong impact on one's thinking, and particularly as one grows up in one's formative years, these actually take hold. Now, what happens then is that the laws and regulations of a state, they're codified based on these attitudes and beliefs. So the inferiority and the lack of worth of women was actually formalized in law. Now, men, of course, absolutely believed it. They, they actually reveled in it. But, unfortunately, by and large, women also accepted it. After all, it was a law of the land. Now, surprisingly, even Greek philosophers, these enlightened Greek philosophers, with the exception of Plato, you know, even they cast women as inferior beings. So you see, over a period of time, this perception became embedded in the male psyche. Surprisingly, as I said, it also did with women. Now, in fact, uh, over the centuries, over millennia, women not only accepted it, but they gloried in their submission, and therefore the nobility of their gender. They put their submission to their inferior status, as a noble gesture, as accepting the divine will. Now, if you recall the character of Kate in Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, now, of course, it was written by a man, but nevertheless, um, that play reflected the social sentiments of the time. And if you recall, there's a famous the famous words spoken by Kate when she when she catches the other two wives by the ears and brings them to their husbands, and she says, "Thy husband is thy Lord. Thy husband is thy Lord, thy life, thy keeper, thy head, thy sovereign." This is what a wife is telling another wife. So you see the acceptance there. Now, this was normal in the 16th century. Okay, you might say that was a long time ago. But not a lot actually changed for at least another 3 centuries. The changes we see actually have happened in perhaps the last 100 years since women's suffrage. I mean, women not allowed to vote until early 20th century. So the attitudes couldn't change when women didn't even have the power to vote. So now the notion of inferiority, has been beaten into our collective social conscience, you might say, and it's been beaten into it for so long that it's almost become a unconscious bias. We're biased. Society is biased. Men are biased because it's a part of our social psyche. So you see, what this leads to is to negligence, to neglect of women, to indifference, and ultimately to violence. Because what you feel is of no value is not hurt by violence. You don't care if somebody is hurt if you don't care about that person. So, see, rape is the ultimate form of violence, short of murder, where women are not only assaulted, but also stripped of their dignity. So, you see, laws, there are plenty of them all over the world. Laws are easy to make, but attitudes take generations and generations to change. Thank you.
That's true. Simi, do you want to ask another question?
Yes, please. I was just thinking in the same line of thought, these days rape has become rampant globally and also in the region. So I wanted to know that do you think the death penalty for rape is an effective deterrent? What is your view on that?
Okay, now that's a whenever we talk about death penalty for anything, it becomes a moral issue, it becomes a controversial issue. Now, let's talk about death penalty as a for rape in Bangladesh. Let's look at that context. Well, in fact, we can look at it in a broader context as well. But you see, a death penalty for rape is a two-edged sword. You see, it punishes the perpetrator and it makes sure that he will never rape again. Fine. But the danger is that it could motivate potential rapists to murder their victims, to avoid having the victim available to testify against him. So if you kill the victim, there is no witness. And now, if the punishment for rape is death, then the rapist loses nothing by killing his victim. I think no matter how terrible the rape, the survival of the victim is important, even if it means surviving in a society where the person may not get justice or may not be treated equally. So that is one danger I think I believe one should bear in mind. Now, justice, you see, is not about revenge. Death penalty is revenge. We feel good when the guy is hanged. But it
Yes.
should not be about revenge. It should be about punishment and deterrence. Justice should be such that the person is punished and that it deters other people from committing the same crime. Now, if the death penalty, as I said, is so severe that people who commit these crimes are either prepared to die or believe they'll never be caught and tried. You see, and if you look at historically, if you look at those countries where they still have the death penalty, it appears that the death penalty itself does not deter people from committing a crime. You see, people
Can,
do
can,
not commit crimes.
can I ask a question over here?
Sure.
I know in the Middle East, I mean, there's death by stoning them to death if there's any crime or they're they are hanged. And I think the crime rates are much less over there. Do you think, like you're saying, we should have justice but not revenge? I feel that if you don't really take this kind of revenge, then they'll keep on and on and on. And justice, when will it prevail? I don't know. I mean, that's the way I feel. So I want to hear a little bit about that from you, Bobby.
Well, I have no statistics about the Middle East, except I know that those countries are terribly opaque. So you really don't know what's happening there. You really don't know what's happening. So
What little we hear.
yes, but that still doesn't actually, since if you don't have the whole picture, you really don't know.
Okay.
In those countries, you have domestic servants who are killed and sent back to their countries, and nothing happens to them. Do you call that justice?
No.
In Bangladesh, if a domestic servant is killed, in most cases, there's so many cases of them being caught and punished and arrested and taken to court and punished. Does it happen in those countries? So I really don't think that
It was
their
just a suggestion I was
dispensation of
making.
justice. No, I know, but I'm just expressing an opinion that I don't think we have a complete picture, and I don't think really think we can compare. I think we should compare ourselves to civilized countries, and
Okay.
in civilized countries, the death penalty has yet to be proven to be a deterrent. As you can see, in every civilized country in the world, the death penalty has been no, I won't
Reduced
say
slightly.
civilized. Let me say advanced country has actually is has been abolished, with except a few states in the USA which still have the death penalty. Russia has the death penalty. China has the death penalty. But we're talking of a different kind of society. We don't want to be a Russia. We don't want to be a China. We really look forward to being a democracy, a liberal democracy, and so we really should compare with liberal democracy. And all the liberal democracies in the world, the death penalty has been abolished. Do you really think they don't care about repeat crimes or deterrence? Of course they do. They've worked out that it doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
Maybe you're
So
right,
anyway,
Bobby. Yeah, I would like to ask you the last question.
no,
Do you see?
I haven't finished yet. Let me just finish
Okay,
this
sorry,
one.
sorry, sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
just a little bit. It's really not much here. I just wanted to say that I'm opposed to the death penalty, both in principle and also because I think it doesn't work. What it does is actually it brutalizes all of us. We accept the death of another human, intentionally caused death of another human being quite easily. That's my personal view. Thank you.
Thank you. So, my last question to you: do you see the situation improving in the near future?
Did you want to ask me about whether what I think is the best deterrent against rape, or do you want to skip that?
No, I want to ask you that. Yes.
Would you like to ask me this first?
No,
Okay.
I just want to know that what you talked about right now, the whole
Yes.
scenario. How would you think the situation can
All
improve in
right.
the near future?
All right. Okay. Let me just again. I will give you my personal opinion. I'm not a
Yeah.
criminologist. I'm not a sociologist, but I have my own views, and I think that there is actually no absolute deterrent against rape because it's usually carried out in the heat of a testosterone overload. The person's not thinking, so it's not like he's thinking, well, if I do this, I'm going to get punished. It doesn't work that way. But for violence, there is a deterrence, and particularly if the violence is if it's grievous and premeditated. And I think a quick legal process, that's important. A quick legal process and a harsh jail term should act as a deterrent. For
Yes.
murder, I think so. For murder, I believe in life imprisonment. And when I mean life, life without parole, which means natural life of the perpetrator. He should never be allowed out of prison for a premeditated murder. This should act as a deterrent because people will learn about the harsh existence of an individual in jail and somebody who is going to die alone in prison. It's not a nice prospect. Now, for rape, I have a rather radical proposal, which you might be a little surprised about. I think that, since rapists take away the dignity of their victim, I think we should take away the masculinity of the rapist. Now,
I
how would
like
you
that.
do
I love that.
that?
It's great.
I
Great idea.
propose, I propose that these criminals should be chemically castrated. before being imprisoned for a substantial period. You see, what most men value most is their masculinity and their sexual prowess. You see, if this guy loses all urge for sex, can never get an erection, has absolutely no interest in sex, that's like a living death. He's a zombie. So I think let rapists suffer the indignity of their own impotence and lack of sexuality, as well as the pain of their substantial jail time. But rapists who murder their victims should be chemically castrated and imprisoned for the rest of their natural life.
Thank you so much, Bobby, for your valuable words and great suggestions. And now it's time for me to go to the second panelist. We will move forward and welcome our second guest speaker, Professor Imran Rahman, for him to say a few words. Yes, the questions are ready from our side. I will again request our president to ask the first question if she's ready. Dr. Simin, are you ready for the first question, please?
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Imran, I was wondering, gender violence is our main topic. So, what are the issues important to you regarding violence against women?
Thank you, Dr. Simin, and thank you, Tutli Rahman, for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here alongside Bobby Bhai. It's a big question. Can I just clarify one thing that I feel that rape and violence are the same. Rape is violence as well. So let's not think that there's rape and then there's violence against women. Um, well, I think, and I also would like to start, since the topic was raised about about the death penalty for rapists. I think, apart from the very valid points kind of articulated by Bobby Bhai, I think it's also important to note that, just by talking about death penalty, we are actually diverting ourselves from the main issue. That the penalty or the punishment comes last, but we should be talking about justice first. And that's where we have a huge problem in Bangladesh, that rape victims are really not getting justice. And, just by saying that we've passed a law regarding the death penalty, these government officials, lawmakers are kind of thinking, oh, we've done our job. They're kind of brushing their hands off, oh, job is done. Not at all. As Bobby was saying, that, the rapist will continue to rape. And very rarely will they, at the moment or before rape, they will think of the implications of death penalty. So I think, and this whole debate about the death penalty is misguided as far as I'm concerned. And quite rightly, there is no evidence of any deterrence effect of a death penalty. And I think we should be looking at the whole justice system. The things that are preventing, rapists from being caught. Many rapists, particularly if they have politically affiliations, are getting away with it. I remember the time. Do you remember in Jahangirnagar University, there was a so-called student who was a political leader who boasted that he just completed his 100th rape in Jahangirnagar University, right? And the harshest punishment is, oh, we have suspended the student. I mean, really? That's the punishment? For somebody who's claiming he's raped 100 times, that we've suspended him? What about the law of the land? How come nobody is kind of throwing him in jail and then bringing him before the courts? Yeah, so I think a lot of the rapes are happening because men of influence are somehow protecting them, and this is something we all know. There was a rape within a military compound. Where's justice in that? Have we seen the light of day in that one? We all know what happened. So I think if you ask me, first of all, I would say the most important thing is that we are continuing to blame the victim of rape. We are saying, and these are very educated people on TV, so-called educated. Let's forget the mullahs for the moment, saying that, oh, that woman should not have been walking alone at that night. Oh, that woman should not have taken a bus at that time. That young lady should not have been wearing, tight clothes at that time. It's all about victim blaming. And surprisingly, even young people are hearing this so much that they also get confused that maybe it's their fault. And can you imagine a victim who's raped? First of all, is raped, and all the consequences of that. Moreover, thinking in the back of the mind, because that is what she's grown up with, or that, maybe I did something wrong. Okay, so that is a huge problem, and the media is basically, in many cases, continuing with this. And we talked about women as an object, and that is also reflected in the way rape is portrayed in the media, the news items, right? Often there is no attempt made to protect the privacy, the identity of the victim, as if it's for the whole nation to have to have the right to hear all the gory details. And what about her sensitivity? So that's number one. The second is that we mustn't forget that rape has many forms. One of the most common forms of rape is marital rape. Now, this is recognized as rape in the advanced societies that Bobby Vai spoke of. I don't think it's recognized yet here. It's on the way, but still it's a long way to go. In the traditional, I bet if you take a survey of men and women, adult men and women, most of will think that maybe, marital rape is not rape. This is kind of falls beyond the ambit of what rape is. But the rape is, it doesn't make it okay just because a woman is married to somebody else, and that somebody somehow by marrying her has also got a license to rape her. So that's something that we should be really fighting about. The other thing, which is going beyond rape and talking about the violence against women in general.
I would like to ask one question. Can I ask
Sure.
a question? Okay.
Sure.
How would you highlight sexual abuse of young girls and women in family settings? This I would like to know.
Well, sexual abuse, particularly of young girls, that is a very, very horrible aspect of violence against women. And that's happening in all countries. But, in our country, it is still a taboo to speak out. I know so sad. I know people I'm close with telling me that they were abused by this elderly uncle, by this friend of the family friend, blah, blah, blah. And when when she, as a young girl, kind of went to the parents didn't want to listen to her. They said, no, you're mistaken. এটা তো আমাদের খুব ঘনিষ্ঠ বন্ধু, এটা তো হতেই পারে না. Can you imagine? I mean, this is like parents are basically taking the side of the molester. And then what do you think is going to happen to that young girl? A lot of times, by the way, this molestation happens to young boys as well. What do you think happens to that person? This is damage. That young girl or young girl bears that throughout her life, and it kind of distorts her having normal relationships for the rest of their lives. And I just can't get it. Parents are many parents would kind of not wish to hear these things. That এটা এসব কথা শুনতে চাই না, কি বলছো এসব? So I think parents have to be educated. You see, I always say that parenting, when we are born, the parenting gene is not in us. Parenting is something that we have to learn. We have to read books about how to be a good parent. We have to know about child psychology, right? Giving love is not parenting. So, I think, maybe we should have that, everybody should pass a parenting test before they get married or something. I'm exaggerating, of course, but to make that point. So parents must be educated about the need to listen to their young girls and to focus on their interests and speak out. By not speaking out, these molesters, family molesters, are there all around. I mean, somebody who molested somebody 20 years ago, he's still all around because nobody speaks about it. So that person is happily walking around. But at some point, somebody should confront. Even if that person is 70 years old, somebody should confront him. Hey, you did this.
Absolutely.
right? There is no statute of limitation. Just like, the Israelis are catching even today Nazis, who are in their 90s and bringing them to their task. The same thing should be there. They should not be protected by this wall of silence.
Likes to be silent. They don't
Yeah.
always
Tuti,
say,
may I ask?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you ask. Go ahead. Go ahead, Simin.
Okay, so one last question from my side before I hand over the rest of the evening to Tutli would be to you, Mr. Imran. Do you think our religious leaders, they're quite influential and we have controversial views about them. So what do you think our religious leaders could do to help in this situation? It's a very tough question, I know, but what is your view on that?
Are you providing personal security after this for me?
We'll try. No promises.
Well, religion has a, I think you asked Poppy Bhai about cultural aspects of rape, but that includes, of course, religion. I mean, you look at the Catholic Church and all the sordid thing that has happened and is still happening. You look at what the Taliban did. Just today, I was early morning, I was watching Al Jazeera, and I was watching Taliban execute a woman, absolutely just with a AK-47, because she was apparently found guilty of adultery. And then 2 other women were shot in the cars because of, again, extramarital sex. Somebody was whipped because, and you look at our so-called religious leaders, or the sort of, well, I don't know what to call them, was mafil jara kore, was kore, and you see what spews out of their mouths, and it's all there in the YouTube, and many of us watch it to laugh at it, but the majority watch it, and hear their words and believe it. Do you remember that really disgusting sort of explanation of what some Bangladeshi men will get in heaven? The description of the 72 virgins in detail, right? I mean, this is pornography, right? I mean, and the look on the faces of the young men. So this is all part and parcel. They are getting away with saying all kinds of things. They are spewing out medieval concepts about relationship between a man and a wife, right? And none of them believe in the rights of a modern marriage. So they have a huge influence. My question is, how are they able to get away by saying these things? You see, if I stand up and say something else, I'll be hauled up saying I've hurt somebody's religious sentiment, and then I'll be charged under the blasphemy laws and blah blah blah. I mean, this man is spewing out hatred against women, almost sanctifying a rape, or they are just an object, and nothing happens to it. Thousands of people are sitting there and cheering him off. Right? The videos are going in the YouTube. We hear it on the mics, even sitting in this so-called exclusive corner of Bangladesh called Gulshan. So they have a huge role to play, and they're getting away with it. And somehow they've made it as if these are things you can't touch. Somebody has to be brave enough to say, "Hey, this is not what Islam is." Right?
Right. Yes.
Thank you so much for that, Tutli Rahman. My dear friend, I will now hand over the rest of the evening to you. Thanks to the 2 panelists from my side. Thank you so much. So happy to have had you for this webinar.
Thank you for being there, Dr. Simin, because we don't have much time anyways.
Yes.
So you've
Thank
been
you
there
so
for
much.
80%
Take
of
care.
it.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
much.
Dr.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So my last question to Imran. The law against rape must be reviewed and updated. Do you think the laws of our country should be reviewed and updated? What do you think?
Well, I have limited knowledge of that, but from what I read in the newspaper, I think the laws of rape are outdated. There's been some, little tinkering with it, but I still think that the whole process, starting from the time a rape victim goes to the police station and the way the evidence is taken, it's very humiliating. It's very insensitive. So I definitely think, I definitely think the laws need to be brought in line with the laws of modern countries, where the victim must not be going through a second trauma. The rights of the victim must be protected, and she must get a fair chance of getting justice. Um, but somehow, because of this law, and because of the fact that victims their identities are not protected often, uh, rape victims themselves don't want to come forward, or their parents or family members don't want to, because then it's out in the open in the current scenario, and then there's a very risk that their dear one will be stigmatized and that has its own implications. So yesterday I was watching, I don't know, do you watch Netflix? I was watching this crime series called Delhi Crime, and it started with the story, remember, of Delhi, this young girl who was raped in the bus. And it was a brutal,
Yes.
not only the rape, but it was a brutal injury to her. I mean, the most brutal that I've ever heard of. And then she was thrown on the road, and they tried to, and I was just watching that thing. And you see, so rape is one of the most common violence against women things, and somehow we are not able to make this equate this in most people's eyes. People think there's violence against women which is bad, like beating your wives, beating a female, and they think, oh, rape is safe. They are not the same. Rape is the most common form of violence against women, and it's happening more and more. But because I think the media is there, and also because people are raising the issue much more, victims are coming forward much more, and I think we should really up our campaign, and make sure that we make it very difficult for men to rape. And if unfortunately the rape does happen, we must ensure a very quick, rapid justice for the victim.
Thank you so much, Imran. I mean, I call you Imran, so I'm not going to say Professor Imran all the time, for your thought-provoking suggestions and words. But there's one question that's coming from a student from ULAB School of Business. I don't know if you want to take it or not. It's up to you, because we are already over our time. So the question is, I'm a student from ULAB School of Business. My question is, if a woman wants to be independent and her family is not supporting her with that, what should she do? Do you want to answer it, or should we just?
I mean, it's difficult, if the student is above 18. I mean, they are actually an adult, independent adult.
Yeah.
So they can get married on their own. Really, technically, they don't need the permission of So it's a difficult question. It really depends on the relationship the student has with the parents, and there is no right and wrong answer. It depends on the family circumstances. Ultimately, the other parents, the student will have to convince the parent that she is mature enough. They can trust her to be on their own, and that it brings no shame. It'll give her an opportunity to make herself a success, find the opportunity. So we see that all the time at ULAB. Often when the field trips, some parents don't allow their daughters to go on an overnight field trip, let's say 2-day field trip. And sometimes we as teachers try and talk to the parents, and often we are successful in allaying their fears. So essentially, the battle is hers, but ULAB teachers are there to counsel her and stand by her side.
Thank you so much, Imran and Bobby. Thank you both so much for coming today. and giving your viewpoints, which we really appreciated on a very sensitive topic, which is say no to violence against women and rape. So I would also like to thank Dilara Khan of ULAB for organizing all the universities to be present here today. And last but not the least, a big thank you to our media partner, UNB, Nahar Khan and her team, and Cosmos Zanshan Tehmina for their tremendous support in doing the needful. We'll be back again soon. Do stay tuned and support our cause. Stop, say no to violence against women. That's all from us today. Goodbye and stay safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.